to, as Sister Ranjan was saying, the third in our series here on purity. And a very warm welcome to Brother Yogesh, who's actually in the UK at the moment. So we're in the same time zone, which is really good. It's great to have you with us, Brother Yogesh. Thanks so much. So in the series so far, we have heard from Sister Genti on the subject of awareness and purity of awareness, the way in which our core being, our innate being, is that essentially of purity. And then in our last session with Brother Charlie, we came from an awareness of purity to an awareness of our thoughts and our feelings, and how to bring about purity in this area of our consciousness. And you could say that in both those cases, the exercise has been one of looking internally, of analyzing our internal world. But in today's session, we begin to find the interface between our internal world and the world around us, the external world. Because as we go out into the world, we see things, we observe things, we meet people, and of course, we have a response, we have a reaction to those things. So we're coming into the field of action and active awareness in today's session. And these two words we're going to be journeying with for the next 45 minutes, attitude and words, are very interesting because, of course, they arise from a place of awareness within us. So, Yogesh, maybe if we could just begin by hearing from you the extent to which you feel our attitudes shape our experience of the world.
Yes, hello everyone. Greetings to Sister Ranjan, the Dallas team, and also Philippa. Yes, what you say is very true in terms of the interface between our inner world and our outer world. And what I have found is in practical life, if, for example, you like a person, it's because of their attitude. Or if you don't like a person, it's also because of their attitude. So attitude is very much in the forefront of our practical life experience. And, to answer the question, I would just like to maybe try to define what we mean by attitude. And what I understand, it's to do with my thought patterns. When I have repeated thought patterns, it creates an attitude. And the more often I have that particular thought pattern, the more set that attitude becomes within myself. And once that happens, then my thoughts create a vibration. And my vibration then creates an atmosphere. So I would say that since thoughts are very much the currency of human life, in fact, I believe your life is a reflection of the thoughts you are choosing to produce. It's the beginning of my entire life experience. And I would also like to quote Viktor Frankl, who said a simple but very true thing, that the last human freedom we all have is the freedom to choose our attitude in any set of circumstances. So in that sense, it does create our life. And even if my circumstances are challenging or difficult, if I'm able to maintain a healthy, a positive, a constructive attitude, then I believe I'm able to find a way out of any situation. Plus, I add one more thing, that I believe a constructive and positive attitude is also contagious and is like a magnet, that it will bring cooperation and help to me, bring resources to me, even where I may find myself inadequate to do something. So very much it's a big part of our life experience.
It is also interesting because when we were looking in our last session about thoughts and feelings, very often we have a level of awareness, of what we're thinking, and we have a level of awareness around what we're feeling. But our attitudes can somehow creep up on us. And we have absorbed them from the culture that we grew up in, from the family that we were raised in, from the world around us. And they seep into our being without our even knowing that they're there. And we can very often just not have any awareness that we are carrying a set of attitudes, because to us, well, that's just right. You know, my attitude is the right attitude. It's normal. Everyone should have the same attitude as me. And so on the spiritual path, there is a process we go through where we bring awareness to our attitudes and notice where those attitudes have come from. Where have we picked them up? And are they helpful to us? Or actually, are they creating further division in the world? I'm wondering if you could say a few words about how your awareness of your attitudes have evolved, particularly in
Mm.
the light of the fact that you went from being raised in the UK to living in Turkey, in a different culture with a different mindset and presumably a different set of attitudes. How did you bring awareness to your attitudes on that journey?
Yeah. Well, I believe that relationships are a great mirror through which we are able to have an insight and awareness into our own inner world. And so, what I have found, and one way by which I try to measure the, let's say, the uh, usefulness or positivity of my own attitude, is to look at least my main relationships with other people, whether it's where I usually live in Istanbul or even if I'm traveling somewhere. So, one thing is this, that I try and check that in my relationships with other people, is there a flow, an exchange of respect, friendliness, love, happiness? And if that's flowing well, then for me, it's a sign that, yeah, there is something good in my attitude towards this individual. But if it's not, and sometimes it's just unspoken, if there's some tension or friction with any person, then I try to look at myself and ask myself, is there something I am doing consciously or unconsciously, which is creating an energy that is blocking the flow of happiness and respect in my relationship with this person? For example, am I perhaps unconsciously rejecting this individual because his or her way of doing things is different to mine? And I've found that these things are very deep, very subtle, these unconscious bias or prejudice that we may carry. So, my own experience being, born in Africa and grew up in an Indian family, but my education was in the UK and living in Turkey. So various cultural influences upon me. So it helped me to be aware that there are some, good things I have absorbed in terms of the culture around me, but there are also some shortcomings. And I have something to learn from the people who surround me. Um, and I find that checking my own self to see my level of contentment with myself and how content are others with me is a good mirror to be able to have an insight into my own attitude. I'll add one more thing here. And I think as meditators, and if we build meditation into our lifestyle, we also develop an ability to almost to detach from our own selves and observe our inner world, to observe how my attitude, my mental stance is working. And I think that's a big plus for people who meditate regularly, is to be able to have that detached observer perspective of my own self. So I do tend to do that fairly regularly in order to see where maybe I'm going wrong and where I need to make a change in order to make my relationships work smoothly.
That's a lovely way to check, the mirror of the soul in terms of the relationships with others and how those are flowing. And you talk about being a meditator and being on a spiritual path, but of course that's no guarantee of having attitudes which are coming from a place of purity, because again of this cultural influence, there seems to be a sort of a human element, a human nature which seeks to find ways of feeling superior to others. And it can be very subtle. So on a more gross level, we have in the world, people who may believe that the paler the skin you have, the more value you have as a person, or that if you're in a male body, you have more power and influence and more value, or conversely, if you're in a female body, you're actually more useful. Or in India, you have the whole caste awareness. In the UK, we have a huge class awareness. And it can even creep into a spiritual community that feel that they have the edge over people who aren't spiritual. It's like we're finding ways of making us feel that we're in the right and judging people who aren't like us or who we can find to be separate or not as valued as us.
Mm.
And we create attitudes and belief systems around that. What do you think it is in the human psyche that makes us do this? And how on the spiritual path, and it can be people who've had many years practice, who are still carrying some of these attitudes, they haven't shifted.
Mm.
How do you apply spirituality in those situations?
That's a great question. I think in one word, the reason why we may do that is due to feeling insecure. So when we feel insecure, then the ego plays these games of trying to justify my own behavior, judging other people, or concealing my own faults by highlighting the faults of others and so on. So one big part of the spiritual journey, and this is something I particularly appreciate in our study, is that I need to improve and create a healthy self-relationship. So in terms of the two main avenues of relationship we have, one is to check my relationships with others, but also to check my relationship with myself. And am I seeing myself as a spiritual energy? Why may I compare or judge others by the color of their skin or their social background or caste or creed or tribe or so on? It's because I myself, in that instance, am not rooted in true identity, which is I am a spiritual energy. I am a soul. If I see myself as a spiritual energy and I practice living in what we call as soul consciousness, then I find that necessarily when I see another person, the first thing I will acknowledge is here is another soul. Here is another spiritual being. And I believe in terms of our relationships with each other, that is the first level of relationship which has become suppressed. And therefore, pretty much everybody lives in the second level of relationship, which is the things you mentioned: nationality, race, culture, religion, and so on. So, it all comes back to basics, starting from inside out. As is the saying, you don't see the world as it is, but you see the world as you are, according to who you think you are. In my own experience, having started on this journey from the age of around 8 or 9, I found that the practice of soul consciousness, the experience of the soul conscious awareness, is really fundamental to the whole spiritual journey. And it's the first lesson in spirituality, but I also think it's the last lesson in spirituality. The whole spiritual journey is soul realization, and everything else follows the more I experience the state of being in soul consciousness.
As you say, this is a point that we will keep returning to throughout this series, because it's the foundation stone upon which the entire house is built. And in terms of attitude, it's a real leveler, because once you have that awareness of being a non-physical spiritual being, a point of light energy, the same as every other individual on the planet, you've immediately got a sense of brotherhood, of
Mm.
sisterhood, that we are all essentially part of one family. So, you've been meditating for all of these years, and you've put your position forwards. What do you do, therefore, when you encounter someone who is very clearly demonstrating an attitude that doesn't comply with your attitude? Let's say,
Yeah.
for example, someone who's being overtly racist or
Mm.
sexist or whatever. How do you encounter that?
Yeah. I'd say two things. Firstly, and I speak from experience, and I've made huge mistakes, of course, on my own journey. But firstly, I try to remember the principle that let me not take sorrow from this person, from their words or their tone of voice, or their appearance, or maybe something they write. So I try to see not just what is happening on the surface or what is being said, but the lesson for me beneath that situation. And I ask myself there, am I taking sorrow from this individual? And the lesson, I need to practice to be stable. I need to practice to maintain my dignity, my self-respect. And if I'm able to do that, then I feel that for the person who may be racist, sexist, etc., then I would be able to generate kindness or benevolence or compassion to the other. Because what I've understood over the years from the great teachers I've had the benefit of learning from is that when somebody is giving pain to another, it's because they are in pain themselves. So I mustn't take that insult or hurt personally, but rather I must observe and try to help with my good wishes and kind feelings if I myself am stable first. So the attitude of disliking or rejecting someone, people pick that up very easily. And that simply exacerbates a situation and makes the other worse. So these are the two steps I have found. Be stable, don't take sorrow, don't take it personally. And secondly, have good wishes, benevolent feelings, so that soul also feels comforted. And hopefully in the long term, that soul will have its own realization to come out of that hurtful behavior.
It does take a degree of mastery, though, to just simply not take sorrow, because if a sorrowful situation is being thrown at you,
Mm.
to in that moment make a conscious choice to not accept the sorrow is something that takes a while, I would imagine, to get to that point. But also, what you're talking about here is to try and understand the other person before you try and judge them, because there will always be a reason in someone's life story why it is they have reached the place that they are in.
Mm.
And so to try and walk a mile in the moccasins, as the saying goes, of another, to see that their attitudes have been formed by their life journey, and that they're not the same as yours, and that it's okay to be different. I think in today's society, people have this need to be right, and this need to persuade other people of the rightness of their position. Do you find that still coming up for yourself, or are you happy to let go of that now?
Yeah, I'm in a process of maturing and reaching my own spiritual goals. So, to some degree, I feel I've made progress, but there's a huge amount of uh, journeying I still have to do. Um, Here are some things which have been very meaningful for me over the years. Again, spoken by some very, very wise people. And here is two particular things I heard. One is that the journey of spirituality is a return journey. So that means it's possible for me to do and possible for everyone to do. So if I do come across somebody whose behavior is hurtful, whether it's to me or it's towards somebody else, I try and remember that this is not the real, original, or natural state of this soul. And therefore, for all of us, there's a potential to heal and to return back to full spiritual health. So that's one point. And the other one is connected with, again, our awareness. This is the key, or the basis of making that return journey, is knowing that if I am on my own journey to wholeness and fullness, then that's also my contribution towards others changing. And therefore the phrase that it is your behavior that defines you and not your beliefs. So, the proof is in the pudding, and everyone can have a different idea about things. But ultimately, one's behavior, one's actions, one's interactions, that's what sort of defines an individual. And there's no argument there. People can argue with what you say, but they can't argue with who and what you are. And so I feel that spirituality in that sense is to be lived. I love the saying that spirituality cannot be taught. It can only be caught. Yeah, to be able to catch it and put it into my own life. And then other people will themselves comment upon it, rather than one having to sort of state, this is what I think is right and this is what I think is wrong.
I love that idea of the return journey, because it implies that we are, remembering who we are. We're returning to our original perfect form, which we have been in the past, and we're journeying back to that again. I think that's a lovely idea. But this whole series is looking at purity, and I'm wondering how we define attitude in terms of purity, especially in today's world where there are so few examples of pure attitude around us. It's so often mixed in with ego. It's mixed in with acquiring for the self. It's mixed in with selfishness of one form or another. And I know on this path there's a huge focus on coming into an experience of the divine source. And I wonder what you have found in your many years of meditating on this divine source, how that has given you a template or an example or a quality of being that you can use to inform your own purity of attitude. What have you learned about your experience with the divine, and how has that shaped your understanding of pure attitude?
Yeah. Firstly, to say that, you said there are very few examples. Yes, but there are some examples, and you've also come across some great people who really modeled what it really means to be a spiritual person. And so I've been hugely inspired by interacting with them over the years. And yeah, one of the things that they report, or they say, is that what they have become is as a result of their link with this divine source, with this very benevolent energy and being. So I too was encouraged by seeing their life, that let me also build my personal connection with the divine source. And so for me, that divine source, the supreme God, or whatever word we use, is absolutely fundamental to me being able to emerge my own purity of attitude. And let me say further, my own divinity of attitude. And maybe this is the biggest reason for why I feel I need to do this regularly, especially in the morning times. You know, waking up in the morning, if I may, I just use this little analogy with this symbol with the three fingers. Um, when I wake up in the morning, firstly, let me engage with myself and remember that I am a spiritual being, I am a soul, I am a spiritual energy. And then secondly is my personal sense of connectedness with the divine being, who very much I see as the source of love, the source of peace, the source of light. And what happens through that is the best within me rises to the surface. And that's it. You know, I want the best within me to rise to the surface, to emerge, so I can use it for myself and I can offer it to the world as a kind of contribution of my life. And then the third finger then represents connecting with the world, with people, with family, with job, and so on. So, in this sense, the connection with the divine very much is a lifelong relationship. One may see the divine as a power source, as a generator, as an ocean. There are so many metaphors, but yet to be able to live with a pure attitude, especially when you may be challenged, one needs strength for that. Where does that strength come from? So I feel it's in this personal sense of connectedness with the divine source that the strength comes to be able to practicalize and live these things in the day-to-day existence.
I like what you're saying there about this giving to the world. It's almost like benevolence, an attitude of benevolence, of giving.
Mm.
And there is a sense in which if we want to experience something, the best way to experience it is to first give it, because by giving to others, you somehow get it as well.
Mm.
And yet in today's society, it's the other way around. People are seeing what's in it for them. What can they take to improve and better their situation? Do you consciously cultivate this attitude of giving to others, of having a benevolent outlook on the world? And if so, what has that given you?
Yeah, definitely. One of the lessons that came home to me was I cannot really progress spiritually unless I am serving others. So, on the one hand, yes, it does feel great when you serve and you share and you help to empower others. It's great for them, but firstly, it's good for me. It helps me to, first of all, learn what it is that I'm sharing, but it also creates a greater sense of self-respect and self-confidence. And the analogy which has helped me to realize the importance of this is that circulation is necessary for health. So, for example, if your blood circulation is good, it's a step in the right direction for health. In a room, if the air circulates, people stay awake and alert. In an economy, if the money circulates, then the society can be healthy economically. So too it is with one's own spiritual growth. Whatever I am learning and absorbing, I need to express it. I need to express it and share it, which keeps me spiritually healthy, keeps me active, keeps me alert. Plus, I have found, new ideas emerge, new insights emerge as a result of involving myself in this process of sharing and expressing. And it's good for others, and it's also good for me. And I believe that as a principle, human beings need to share and help others in order for their own personal happiness to grow. If I only just keep things to myself, then I think I could become like a stagnant pond where eventually things just cease to exist, but rather like a river, if I'm flowing and expressing, new life emerges, and I feel I grow as a result.
So it's keeping it fresh all the time. Perhaps we should be considering this other word, uh, attitudes and words. And people sometimes feel that, words don't really, they're only words. What can really words do? And yet words can build you up and words can destroy you. How do you see this attitude between this relationship between attitude and words? And what do you see as the importance of words, the words that we speak?
Yeah, I love the phrase somebody said, words are worlds. Yeah. Within a word, there is a world. And we know that words can hurt people and create emotional wounds that can last a lifetime, especially if somebody's been spoken to in it's a very critical way in young age or in childhood. It can last a lifetime. But also words can uplift. Words can bring the best out of a person. Words can help somebody to believe in themselves. So choosing the right words to speak is, yeah, that's certainly one thing which I think is very clear to see. But additionally, I think when it comes to spirituality, if my words are coming from a place of what I would say is inner silence, a place of self-respect, those words will also be loaded with spirituality, with pure feelings, with kindness. The tone of those words can help to bring somebody out of a bad mood, help to lift someone from, when they were feeling down in the dumps. And just recently, in one of the spiritual lessons we were studying, the principle was being highlighted that take care of the words you speak, not just get rid of negative words, not just bad words, but even go beyond ordinary words. So when we speak unnecessarily, then what's happening is that the energy of the mind is being spent and in fact wasted. And one thing I have become more aware of recently is to speak words which are essenceful and words which are economical. So if I consider my word energy to be an asset, if I consider it to be wealth, let me pay attention to choosing words carefully and learning to speak them at the right time so they are meaningful. So those kinds of words, also embedded with soul consciousness, I think that they give power to my own mind, as a result of which I would develop willpower, tolerance, patience, and so on. Plus, I think such words touch the hearts of other people and also help them to feel empowered with the spirituality that they contain.
And words are arising from our attitudes.
Words are reflecting our attitudes. Yeah, so we may speak automatically or as a reaction to something, and it's an indication of the attitude which I'm carrying. So words are extremely important, and they can be real tools to change a person's life if I pay attention to my words.
Mm. There does seem to be this lovely progression, this flow, which you can go either backwards or forwards, from words springing from attitude, and attitudes being informed by your thoughts and feelings, and your thoughts and feelings being informed by your awareness. It does all begin with awareness, which is why meditation is such a good place to begin, because meditation is the practice of becoming the observer of all of these things, so that you can bring awareness to all of them. But we do have this tendency to use words that pull people down. We speak negatively about people, we gossip about people, we even do it to ourselves. We will share negatively about things that we've done, or things that have happened to us. And these carry a vibration. Words carry an energy and a vibration, and they do affect the world around us. Words are not happening in a vacuum. They carry a consequence. So is this how we change the world around us, primarily by becoming the observer of the words that we're using and being mindful of them and changing them?
For sure. I would say, in addition to the spoken word, also the unspoken word, my conversation with myself, about myself, or situations or circumstances I have been in, plus my conversation with myself about other people. So firstly, those words I need to pay attention to. And if I find that I am speaking negatively or critically in terms of my self-dialogue, then I need to counter that, to fix that. And there, for me, what works, what has helped me a lot, is just to be aware that the mind is a child. And what do children do? Sometimes they get very excited, but also sometimes they can get very upset. And when the mind is misbehaving as a child, I must not be influenced by that. And in this context, and I'll come to the question in just a second, in this context, my intellect is like the parent. If I find the mind is misbehaving, I need to empower my parent to say, okay, mind, that's enough. Let's be quiet now. It's not as bad as you think it is. And to kind of fix and heal my self-dialogue, my inner dialogue. And if I work on that and make my inner dialogue healthy, constructive, and positive, then it kind of opens out into the way I see people, the way I see situations. Then I believe that the words I actually speak to others will be colored by the quality of my inner dialogue, my inner conversation. So it won't just be empty, nice, polite words, like niceties or pleasantries we share with each other, which is good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's coming from this inner space of my own inner dialogue, which is healthy and constructive, then the words I speak, I believe, have more impact upon others. And people would feel that this is real. This is not, somebody just saying nice things, but it's coming from deep inside. And that's what I was very inspired by growing up as a young man, seeing these wonderful examples of living spirituality, because it was coming from inside those yogis I know. It just, just the arrow hit the target. It struck the heart that, wow, how can a person be like this? And so it just raises that point again that first be it and live it before you say it. And then there are no arguments, and it doesn't even require proof. And for me, that's what real spirituality is about.
And I can see as well how if words are coming from a place of purity, then the words will be more powerful, because that purity has power within it, and you can use words to give a signpost or an indication of that quality of purity. But I can imagine some people listening to this and hearing your story of being surrounded by these amazing yogis and meditators from the age of 9, and you've had all these wonderful examples of spiritual leadership in your life. For a lot of people, they're not surrounded by that. They're surrounded by people who, like to have a good gossip, like to criticize the government for what they're doing, like to criticize other people, like to point out people's shortcomings, play the blame game. To unhook from all of that, you've got to be quite strong and not join in. And I'm wondering if you've got any experience of how you can, in that moment, not just become like everyone else in order to fit in,
Mm,
but take a stand and say, actually, this is my truth. And it's not what you're saying, it's
mm,
different. But
mm.
I don't want to criticize that person by joining in with the gossip, because that's not going to help them. How do you do that without coming across like a real goody two shoes?
Yeah, well, I have had the experience of being surrounded by people who like to have a good gossip, criticize the government, etc. Growing up, going to school, very competitive, and people, saying all kinds of terrible things to each other, and also working. I worked for many years in central London and then later in Oxford. So what I find helped me first of all was, again, I come back to my morning routine. I can't stress the importance of this enough, that the morning experience affects the rest of the day. And it's like, for me, morning meditation is like charging the soul battery. And if I've done that in the morning, then I have the strength to not be influenced in the day by all those experiences. And I find that I've never had to say to my work colleagues or to my schoolmates that I don't want to join in that criticism, or I don't think it's good for me to do that. But naturally, they have begun to understand, this guy doesn't do this.
Mm.
This guy doesn't want to get involved in this. He's not interested in trashing so and so. And then they just begin to avoid you when it comes to those kinds of, let's say, negative conversations. And in fact, sometimes I've also found that, people who may be in those conversations but don't really want to be in it, maybe because of peer pressure they're taking part, some would come to me afterwards and say, "Hey, how come you're not like that?" Or "How come you don't get involved?" So I do believe deep down everybody wants to be good, wants to be nice, but to be nice, maybe you get labeled as goody two shoes, and you think you're superior to everyone, so they join in. But I do believe after a while, people begin to respect the fact that you choose to see goodness, you choose to be positive, because that's our core. We want to return to that at the end of the day.
Mm, lovely. Well, do post any questions if you're watching this live. Do post any questions in the chat box if you would like to ask Yogesh something about this whole topic of bringing purity into attitudes and words. We've got a few minutes before we get to the end of today's program. But it is interesting when you consider how, the same thing can happen to two different people, but it's their attitude to what has happened, it's their response that determines the course of what happens going on from there. It's a fundamental part of how we navigate the world. Good things can happen, bad things can happen. Your attitude will decide whether it's good or bad, or maybe doesn't need to decide. But how you respond, the attitude that you take, determines everything.
Mm, very true. Yeah.
Well, we can't overstate that enough. A bad thing can happen to someone and they can find the positive in it and turn it around and make a good outcome, like sewing silk from a sow's ear. They just somehow have that ability. And we all of us encounter situations that could bring us down, that could draw us into those negative conversations.
Yeah.
And yet keeping an attitude that is positive, that is bringing those qualities of purity through, are fundamental in how we respond to these changing situations. Do you have any examples in your life of when you have made a choice to respond in a certain way, and how that has affected outcome?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with you that it is the attitude which then leads to my further experience. let me share some tools which have helped me in practical situations. Times when, for example, maybe I made a mistake in something, in some event I was organizing, or I forgot something and was on the receiving end of criticism or even ridicule, which was difficult to deal with. But what helped me was just asking these questions. How can I grow through this? How will this make me stronger? What is this situation teaching me? I found these three, one or two more questions, have been very, very pivotal in just helping me to move forward from a situation. I, for example, was one of those who, if I made some mistake, I would really make myself feel very heavy. I'd think a lot about it and not feel I made a mistake, but I would feel I am the mistake, and that made me feel like a real failure. Partly, it's all ego-based behavior. I recognize that. But then I began to, again, observe others and see how they do things. And then I realized that anything which happens in life, if I have a learning attitude towards it, I can give higher meaning to the situation, and I can use the energy of those emotions to actually make me grow. So there are times, for example, when I moved, to where I live in Turkey, or even when I moved from London to Oxford, many challenges, lots of newness, lots of mistakes, misunderstanding things. But I always had this thought, everything that I am experiencing is a training for me to be better, the next time and the next time. And when I began to have that kind of attitude, then I used those apparent failures as stepping stones to make me grow, to make me more mature. And I feel that, for all of us, the choice of attitude is always in front of us. And it helps to find slogans or little phrases which personally are meaningful to you, which can just help you to move forward and to grow from any situation.
Lovely. We've got some good questions coming in. First, a request to define what you mean by positive. And we've used that word a few times, because you could say that we're giving judgment and value to things that are positive and negative. And maybe they're not positive and negative, maybe they just are, and we shouldn't label them. So how do we have a sort of an attitude that is embracing when it comes to defining positive and negative?
Yeah, it's another huge topic to go into, actually. But in essence, I would define something positive which leads to well-being for myself and also for others. Yeah. And sometimes something may seem negative in the short term, but in the long term, it brings greater well-being, happiness, prosperity, peace, which are some of the titles of this series, not just for me, but also for others. So that's how I would understand the word positive.
So see it over the full picture of time rather than just in that snapshot of a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And another question about encountering things that are completely against my lifestyle or my beliefs or my ethics, and the temptation to respond or react. And we did touch on this a little bit when we were talking about racism and sexism and everything.
Yeah.
But, people's passions are very aroused by things that the wrongdoing that they see in the world. Is it naive to believe that you can have an attitude of it's all fine when you passionately believe that those things aren't right?
Well, I think it's important not to make a person feel judged. If I do believe something is not right, we all as human beings do have a core of goodness, which I think is fundamental to the spiritual journey. So when we come across something which seems to be the opposite of that, I think naturally you will feel within yourself, this is not right. It's not something that I wish to be part of. So as I was mentioning earlier, I need to not take it personally. I need to respect where somebody else is at. And everyone has their own journey through life, through lifetimes, if one believes that. So I need to respect where each person is at and also check the energy with which I am responding to that. If I respond to what I consider to be wrong with anger, for example, with rejection, with disgust, that energy also belongs to what is wrong. And it's simply going to exacerbate the situation, and nothing will really change. But, as again, great people have pointed out, check the energy which is involved in your response. If you want peace, first be peaceful as you create peace. If you want to create happiness, be happy as you do it. And I think that then is what really makes a difference.
I think that's a lovely answer, Yogesh, because what we're saying is that, we have certain qualities that trump others, and the qualities of being a beacon of peace and a generator of peace and love and connection and compassion can sometimes be more important than making a point that brings you into a place of separation and division and anger. So that is definitely
Absolutely.
something to reflect on. I think we've, despite the other questions that are coming in, and they always come in thick and fast towards the end, but we do have to move to our closing meditation now. And it would be lovely, Yogesh, if you could just lead us in a meditation that brings us to this quality of being that we've talked about today, of finding a place within from which we can interact with the world with these qualities of love and compassion that don't need to judge, don't need to criticize, but can just radiate the peace and the purity that we want to be ourselves and we want to see in the world. If we could just have a few moments really experiencing that to close, that would be lovely.
Sure. Okay, so let me just invite everyone. Some of you may be new to meditation. If you feel comfortable, you can just have your back straight and your feet on the floor if you're sitting on a chair. And if you wish, you can have your eyes open or half open or even closed. And I'll just speak out a few guiding words which you may wish to follow. And so let me take a few moments to be with myself. The world outside of me is the world of noise, movement, action, the world of doing. And I have little control over the world outside. But there is a world inside me, the world of my thoughts, of my feelings, of my experiences. The world inside is in my own hands. My thoughts lead to my feelings, and I can choose the thoughts I wish to create. And so I create the thought, I am peace. I am a living point of peaceful energy. Visualize this beautiful star of living light in the center of the forehead. This is my deepest and my true identity. I realize I am not what I have. I am not what I do. I am. I am light. I am peace. I am eternal. And I am free. Just be with this feeling of peace in your mind for a moment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. It's always such a pleasure to spend time with you, and you've really given us a lot to reflect on and carried us further on our journey of purity, happiness, peace, and prosperity. So really, thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Philippa.